Welcome back to the program. It's still the conversation here on Lagos Television. Now, last week, President Bola Tinubu increased Nigeria's budget proposal, that is the 2025 budget proposal, from 49.7 trillion naira to 54.2 trillion naira, citing additional revenues generated by key government agencies. Of course, this was in his letter addressed to both chambers of the National Assembly. And the president gave a breakdown of the agencies, three key agencies really, that of course have, in that letter. And so today we'll be taking a look at if these are justified and of course how soon the budget should be passed, and how Nigerians can also begin to see the dividends of democracy through the budget implementation in 2025. It's February already, almost mid-February, and the budget is still under proposal. Let's see how fast the joint chamber of the National Assembly can pass the 2025 budget. And joining the conversation today is the CEO, Oniko Consulting, George Ashiro. Thank you for being here on the program.
Thank you very much. My pleasure always.
Right. So, just before the break, I was wondering if it is globally accepted that budget proposals can be worked on before they are finally passed. And though, yes, some experts say, why not? It's possible. But I'm sure that Nigerians would like to hear from you this morning. A budget that is under proposal, that all of the T's were crossed and the I's dotted before it was passed to the National Assembly. And then barely 2 months into that, now there is an increment in that budget. Does it seem that all is well?
So that is not an unusual situation.
Okay.
In governments, in corporate sector,
Okay.
Supplementary budgets, additional budgets, tweaking the budget is something you're supposed to do.
Okay. Yes, so it's a no.
Yes, you should do that. The budget you present initially is a framework.
Right.
It's a framework for how you want to run the economy. So if, for example, you have this expectation that you are going to have some income from a particular sector, and then maybe it's an external income, like the case of the aid that supposedly comes from the United States, which is in the line item of that budget of almost 800 billion naira, foreign aid. So what if they sanction against Nigeria?
Yeah.
And then so you have to go back and retweak your budget. So external factors, what we call pestle in management, can influence some of your decisions.
Okay.
So that becomes a supplementary request, to grant you additional permissions, either to raise funds by, debt financing. So that's not where the issue is. I think a lot of issues with Nigerians has always been a case of when you increase the budget, especially when it is in a tremendous amount of increase from the previous year. And the question is the performance of the previous budget.
Right.
What was the percentage performance? And what is the impact on the economy? And building on that, what are now the chances that you have a larger budget? How are you going to finance it? And if you can't finance it, you're going to put us in the larger debt in the years to come.
Yeah.
So deficit budgeting is what we have been doing for as long as I can remember. I mentioned it here last time you asked me to come and talk about the budget. As soon as Buhari took office, there was a global downturn on the economy.
Right.
And the fuel prices were really low. So obviously he couldn't run his budget without borrowing.
Right.
And that's what we've been doing ever since, So I think that is not where the issue is. The issue has to always be budget performance and where you're going to raise the funds. And then, of course, it's very controversial. Some people will tell you, for example, that you already expected to have a deficit of about 14 trillion.
Yeah.
So if you know you're going to have extra income, why don't you just use it to plug the deficit and reduce the deficit?
Right.
But you see, businesses run on debt. Businesses run by borrowing other people's money. So somebody probably advised him that, look, use other people's money to run your economy. Pay 30% interest.
Okay, I was going to take you on that deficit budgeting because, like you rightly said, some economists are of the opinion that these income that we are generating now, or that we are expected to generate, should have been targeted towards the financing of the deficits in the budget. But that aside, Let's look at the allocation for this, excuse me, income. The Bank of Industry will get 1.5 trillion for recapitalization. Bank of Industry and the solid mineral allocation will also have its allocation raised by 1 trillion naira, which makes it about 10 trillion naira. What does it portend for the economy of the nation in 2025?
So what the president has said is that 3 core areas provides an opportunity for additional income, revenue that is expected to go into agriculture, food security. You know that food inflation is the worst problem a country can have, because if we think of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, food is first: food, clothing, and shelter. So if you cannot provide food, you're going to get riots. So putting your effort on agriculture, you know, is something all of us will agree on, because we need rice to come down, we need beans to come down, we need all these costs, and that means we can't be importing. You can't be granting import duties, reduction on import duties, just so that people can import. Because the more they import, then forex will now go up again. So what you need to do is exactly that. So that's not the problem, you know, investing in agriculture. Bank of Industry, I think the idea behind it is that they can now empower SMEs. They can now provide more funding. And then, of course, when funding goes to the SMEs, then employment goes down. You know, unemployment goes down because they can generate more funds. Of course, the issue I always raise every time on your program is it is easy to allocate and to expend the money, but who is monitoring the actual implementation, the usage of these resources? Because if you give a company 50 million on the basis that you're expecting that company to generate maybe 300 new jobs, and they just use it to buy one single Rolls Royce, then what happens to that money? So we have quite a lot of that in our culture, a culture where people never use the resources provided for them for the purpose for which it's provided. And unfortunately, the government itself, because of impunity, the government itself, or politics, the government itself sometimes doesn't enforce this monitoring, you know, this paddy Apache at the back. So those are the challenges with every single time you bring a budget, whether it's 100 trillion or 1 trillion, it's always about performance of that budget, implementation of that budget. And I think that's a bigger challenge for us.
Okay, for the solid minerals now, we are trying to diversify the economy.
Yes.
Is that a good move?
Absolutely. I mean, we have solid minerals. And if we don't invest in it, it will be stolen. Stolen by individuals, as we already hear it in Zamfara and other places. But what we don't know is this investment has gone to solid minerals. What is it? Is it infrastructure development? Is it investment in looking for new opportunities? Is it maintaining what we have? Is it for security of what we have? So those are things, you see, when you go back to the National Assembly and you tell them you need almost 5 trillion, and then you give a broad swath of 3 key areas. Now we need to break down to the line items. What precisely would, you recapitalize. So what if you recapitalize and they retain that capitalization? And, you know, and don't disburse. And then don't forget that disbursing doesn't mean it should be disbursed within the calendar year or within the budget year. So what recapitalization means, the money is available for you to run for the next 4 or 5 years. So there's no pressure. So next year, are we going to get the same thing when you recapitalize again? So the question will now be, this recapitalization, what is the actual purpose? You know, what are they going to do with the extra funds? You know, when a bank recapitalizes, they will tell you they want to open more branches or they want new services. What will the Bank of Industry do with this? What will the Solid Minerals Ministry do with that? What will the Agriculture Ministry do with this? So that you and I, who are investors in this field, will know precisely where to target. So I think that is where the president needs to do additional work in selling this to us.
Right. The president also mentioned 3 key areas, of course, where the sources of the increased revenue will come from. He mentioned the FIRS, mentioned the Nigerian Customs Service, and then government-owned enterprises. My concern really here is for the FIRS, where at the moment we're still having issues with the tax reform bill, especially still getting more states to buy into this. Do you see this as, you know, is this going to scale through, you know, the FIRS as well as the new tax reform, even though the National Assembly is saying they will end up passing this bill at the end of, you know, maybe by March. And so now that, of course, the FIRS 1.4 trillion naira is what the president has put as increased revenue from that area. So with that and the other 2 areas that Mr. President has listed here, how is this expected to play out?
All right, so FIRS, one of the mandates that they have received is to widen the tax nets, get more people paying tax. They are not going to tax you higher, because that's what the reform is about. The reform is to reduce taxation for people earning less than 50 million, reduce taxation for people earning in an individual level less than 800,000. So you're not going to get more money from individual organizations or from individual entities.
Okay.
You're going to try and use that tax reform to get more people in the net.
Into the net, okay.
That look, listen, now it's cheaper. You know, go and register your company. You don't have to pay if you're not generating over a certain amount. You don't have to do this, you don't have to do that. But there's PE. But there's PE. So you register your company, you're already captured in the tax net. Now the LIRS can now go to individual organizations and say, okay, you people should pay. And of course, cumulatively, that generates additional income for the country. So they have so many different, even if you do not have the reforms passed, the existing structure, FIRS has the capacity to see ahead and say, look, we can increase, we're expecting, for example, that more big companies like MTN, like Glo, like Nigerian breweries, they are projected to have maybe 400, 500, 600 billion worth of additional gross profit. And then when we tax them, we can get our money back. See, most of the revenues we get from taxes are from the oil and gas and from the FMCGs. It's not from small SMEs.
How much would they even pay?
Yes, it's not from SMEs. It is usually from the big organizations, the Nigerian business, the Guinnesses of this country, the FCA, what do you call them, UECs and so. They are the ones that pay, the vast majority. In fact, 70% of the entire income, GDP of this country is the private sector anyway. So that's probably what the projection is. Maybe they have spoken to these organizations, they've seen their quarterly results, and they are projecting, for example, that Dangote is going to pay a certain amount of money, and that Dangote is online. So they feel, okay, just Dangote refinery,
bring this in.
Refinery alone can pay 1 trillion. Just because of the expected additional income it's going to get from these operations. So I think that, as a matter of fact, you might even say for a 54 trillion budget, you should expect that actual income from taxes should be in the region of 10–15%.
Of the budget, so
yes,
the
overall budget. We should be looking at like 5 trillion, 10 trillion, if we're, because most other countries in the world, that's where they get most of the revenues. So we still do have that challenge, and you can't remove it because now, I said it last time I was here, I said for as long as you remove subsidy, less people will pay taxes because inflation has taken away the taxability of the average individual and organization.
I love your choice of word. You said projection, expected.
Yes.
Economically now, these projections and expectations, is it 100% sure that those incomes are going to come? That is on one side. Then for the Nigerian customs, does that imply that people who are importing into the country will start paying more?
Yeah, well, naturally, let me even go to the, when you make a budget, it's a projection. So you are projecting, for example, that oil prices will be $75 per barrel. It's
and something is already happening there already.
Yeah, it's a projection.
It's a projection.
It's a projection, which is the reason I said when I first started that budgets are open for tweaking. So when you now look at all these other institutions like that the Ports Authority and the Customs and all that, they are also going to project based on what they are seeing on a monthly basis. So on a monthly basis, if they've seen an increase in the importation of goods and then, and then people are paying more for those goods, and the government expects that it's going to increase excise duties as the year goes by, then they can project that, yes, we can earn 1.2 trillion, and we'll be able to give it to you. And then another thing is that government gives quotas. When government tells you to go and raise 1.2 trillion, you better raise it. That is the basis for which you are appointed as Customs Controller General or whatever. So just like companies give quotas, give expected performances to you and say, look, go out there and make revenues because those targets are going to be used to offset all our costs. That means that's what government has told them to do.
So there's a mandate.
Oh, it's a mandate. I mean, let's even go back to one of the reasons organizations like NEPA, electric companies, when they were doing estimated billing, it was based on the fact that they were giving quotas. So if they needed if they needed to meet 5 million in any particular area, they have to go back and say, okay, everybody has to pay 100,000. So that makes that, then you cannot come back and say, I didn't use it, but they've made that target that month.
That target has been met for that month.
Yes.
Nigeria also has issues with debts, and oftentimes we're always borrowing, and every time we're always going or borrowing. And so this is also one of the reasons which could also be tied to increment in budget proposal. So we know we have significant debts to offset. And so when you look at the amount we're owing, and do you also see that this increment will have substantial amount of money set aside for our repayment obligations?
The biggest debtor nation in the world is the United States of America.
Can you imagine? And they make the other countries feel like...
So America prints its own currency, forces everybody to trade based on that currency,
Right.
and then they are owing everybody in the world.
Okay.
But they believe that they have the capacity to pay back. And so they use other people's monies to fund the
trade.
economy, to trade. So what we've discovered from our business is that a lot of rich investors will tell you that if, for example, you can get a loan from Bank of Industry for 5%, 4.5%. So what if I go to Bank of Industry and say, I need a loan of $1 million? I actually have $1 million at home,
Okay.
or in my bank, or in my business. But I've seen that if I go and take a loan of $4.5 million and I use it to invest in something, it's cheaper than going to the bank
To get my own money out.
Yes, to use my money for the same thing in the expectation that I will get some
profit.
return on investment. So for that 5%, it's a far better risk for me to use your money to do that business.
Than to use my own money.
To use my money, because I can now put my money in a foreign in the treasury bills and get 23%
On that.
on my money. So I'm making 23% on my money, but I'm using your money. I'm paying you 4.5%.
Oh, business sense.
Those are the things that investors understand. So when you see people borrowing money, you have to ask yourself, why are you rich people borrowing money? But they're taking loans because they understand where to find that money, where to put their own investment, and then they spread their portfolio. So I think what Nigeria is doing is, well, I'm not saying that I agree that we should be borrowing endlessly.
Right.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm also saying that the CBN and the people who are running the economy may advise the president and say, look, the money we already have, if we use it all, we won't have enough money to trade. So let's keep our own money, use it for
loans.
Take other people's money, and don't forget, most of these loans are long-term loans, 20, 25 years, at very, very low rates. So use their money. And if we're only paying 30%, you and I take loans to buy cars. If you look at how much money you are using in your salary to pay back, it's usually about an average of 30%. By the time you pay 30% for the loan you used to pay for your flat, or the car you bought, or for your children's school fees, then you get used to the idea that naturally, for every 1 million naira you earn, you're already spending 300 to 400 on just one kind of loan or the other. Wow. So at the level of government, this current budget here is about 30%. What they're paying off is about 30%. Now, they've removed subsidy. People will say, why don't you use subsidy to pay off excess, extra expenditures that you have? You've liberalized the dollar, the forex.
Okay.
But that's also the reason that government now knows that for every $1 billion it earns, it's earning 4 times as much in naira. So that's what they poured back into the budget. That means the budget looks like something that was 27 million just 2 years ago. Now it's 50-something.
50-something.
So all of this comes into consideration. I keep saying it that our problem is not the borrowing. Our problem is what do we do with the money. The problem is not that we took a loan. The issue is, can we see the evidence of it? For example, in Lagos, Lagos is owing tens of millions in terms of dollars. You will see the rail lines. You say, okay, I can see evidence of development there. More roads are being built. Okay, security is improving. Those are evidence of governance. Now, at the federal level, it's a much more difficult issue. far, far more difficult. You have the whole of Northeast that needs redevelopment on top of security matters. We still have security issues that makes it difficult to move goods and services, which is part of what is causing food inflation. So I think that what we want is the assurance that even if you're taking a loan, like I keep saying, if you're going to suffer, let it be for a just cause.
Right.
If you're going to take a loan, let us see that you are putting it on the right places: agriculture, education, security, healthcare. Those are the things that people feel. They feel it on a day-to-day basis. Once they feel it, even if they have to pay more taxes, even if, yes, it's a bit like we can see the evidence of this governance that we are paying for. So,
okay, a further look into the breakdown of this budget is giving us some figures. Critical infrastructure project to get 1.5 trillion in the following areas: irrigation development through River Basin Development Authority, 380 billion; transportation infrastructure, roads and rail, 700 billion; 300 billion for the construction and rehabilitation of critical roads, and 400 billion for light rail network. And then border communities infrastructure to get 50 billion, military barracks accommodation 250 billion, and military aviation 120 billion. These figures are quite big and good, but like you rightly identified, we have problem in this country. The problem that we have is monies will be allocated, but to get these monies released is also a problem. So how do we meet these targets?
So when I was, just to give you a clear example, when I was president of Nigeria Taekwondo Federation, it's a federal MDA. And there's a budget attached to that MDA. And then, so I would, for example, if they say 220 million is allocated to you to run your programs for the year, mostly international programs, I should be able to draw down on it. I should be able to take a request and say, DG sign this, minister approve it, DFA release the money to me. So what you are going to hear is go and use your money first.
And then we'll reform you.
Go and use your resources first, and then come to us. And if you are lucky at the end of the year, you might get maybe out of that 220 million, maybe 4 million or 3 million or 2 million.
200
Wow.
you get 4 million. So what happened to the rest of the
So this is part of what we're talking about, budget implementation. So what you will hear is that the amount of money released from the auditor, from the budget office, from the finance to the ministry for your is not up to what was budgeted. That's the first excuse you are going to get. The second excuse is that the money was not released fast enough to take care of all your needs. So we are going to prioritize. So if 28 Olympic sports are asking for money at the same time, and we're not getting the money, because don't forget that this is budget is a projection.
It is.
It doesn't mean the money is already physically there. They're projecting they are going to earn. So by the time you need it, they're just receiving it. So they'll tell you, you first go and look for money somehow. Now, how are you going to look for money somehow? So naturally, quite a lot of things will not be done.
But when you even eventually look for the money somehow, and at the end of the year, you get something lower than what you had also projected, that means that in coming years, you're also not going to bat an eye.
I think it's even worse than that. Imagine if I needed that 220 million to be able to get athletes to do well to get an Olympic medal.
Right.
Now, I couldn't get the money. I'm only finding 5%, 10%. So naturally, I'm already telling them they are not going to get that medal.
Yes.
But don't forget that this budget was allocated, so at some point that money will still be released.
And so
But it has passed the purpose. So the implementation...
and it will not be returned. It may not be returned.
Well, in rare occasions, we have unspent budgets. Unspent budgets.
We do know that the law says that every unused income must be returned by the physical end of that year. But anybody can carry a voucher and look for how to spend that money at the end of the day. They can, so sudden approvals for travel, sudden approvals. So really the key challenge is all these wonderful things you've mentioned there, is that even a transformational minister will find it difficult to implement the budget if he's not given the resources required at the right time.
So sure. I mean, so the fact that you used the Taekwondo Federation to paint this picture actually made it to sink in better. Because again, this is a smaller fraction of the society.
Absolutely.
But it will amount to the same thing when it comes to budget presentation. And I remember you said earlier that, I mean, fantastic budget, fantastic projections, but if they're not well implemented, we'll continue to have these issues. And so what should Mr. President be doing here in ensuring that, you know, these proposals, when eventually passed by the National Assembly, attains its full potential as the year, within the course of the year? Because again, if you look at the performance of the 2024 budget, it's not that impressive, because you look at it the last quarter of the year and you wonder, what exactly is this? And then that of this year, how do we ensure that our budgets do not keep repeating the mistakes of past years?
So what I think, one of the reasons that Donald Trump has become infamous since he took office is because he set up a department that is managed by Elon Musk. And the job of that department is to go into every area of government and look for where there's waste or malfeasance or misuse of, of funding. So what it means is, let me look at your budget. What are you using the money for? Why is this money here? Why is this money there? That's an independent entity. There's no reason why Nigerian government can't learn from that. It may be infamous, it may be unpopular, but it will force everybody to sit up.
Okay.
So there's no reason why the president of this country and governors and local government chairmen can't have an independent entity. Not a political entity, an independent body of professionals from tax authorities, from economists, all of them. These are people that are not associated with your political party. If you want to succeed as a president, you better think well and do what is good. Because especially when you're looking for a second term, these bodies will be there to ensure that they are going to each ministry to ensure that the implementation and bring back a report to you, quarterly report. Sir, this ministry, 10% performance, 50% performance, 80%, so that you can intervene on time.
Yeah, okay. And then, and then go ahead, Jibo.
We have said so much about government not following through when it comes to budget implementation. As Nigerians, as citizens, what role can we also play to put these people on their toes as regards the implementation of this budget? Because we just hear figures and we are not interested.
Well, unfortunately, I think generally speaking, either by virtue of ignorance or lack of care, most of us do not know the methodology for which we can hold government to account. So whatever we are fed through the media, whatever announcements are made, we have just presumed it is so. But I think one of the ways in which we can always remind political leaders, if they're not implementing what they promised, is through the vote system. If we can't feel the impact of your economic policies, then you are going to lose the next election. And that means we need to engage the House of Reps members who are the ones approving the budget to say, I can't feel the impact of this. We need to be engaging local government chairmen where things are implemented at the local level. We need to be able to have that access. We should use it. I understand that Lagos State, for example, set up a new website that allows an engagement of citizens. Citizens can now go there and log in, and if they don't see what they like, they put it in there. So I think this is same kind of structure should exist all over the country, either by law, or by political might, that allows people to be able to say, we can't feel the impact. If, for example, the president says he's going to bring down inflation to 15%, that's not going to happen. That's a political statement. It's not going to happen. You can't come from 34 to 15 within the fiscal year. It's not going to happen. Historically, it has never happened. There has never been a time in the history of Nigeria that anything went down.
After going up.
Those of us that went to school abroad when we were so and so age knew that I used to carry naira. I would go to the airport with my ticket, and then I would buy pounds in the UK at the airport to pay my own school fees. I would go with naira, and it was 2 naira, maybe £1, right? So my money was given to me. I used to pay my £8,000 a year, unless I would pay myself. Now think of that time. 40 years or 45 years later, look at where we are. Did it go down? Nothing has ever gone down. Price of fuel has never gone down. Price of cars have not gone down. Nothing has ever gone down. The rents that we're paying have not gone down. So inflation has never gone down in Nigeria. What has happened is the rate of increase of inflation may be manageable. Maybe it was an increase of 2%, 3%, whereas it used to be 15%. But the actual inflation rate. Now, I'm not saying the president has not been told by the people in his cabinet that it's possible, But the people who are out there doing business like us,
They know it's not possible.
we know that the reality is that this is not a voodoo economy.
So before we allow you to go this morning, hopefully the budget will be passed perhaps by the end of this month or thereabouts. And so how important is it also to have media reviews? I know we do that in Lagos, where you do quarterly review of your budget, and then also being realistic as to ensuring that you have a workable budget. So how important is it for government to ensure that during the quarterly or mid-reviews, they're actually looking at these things holistically?
So that should be the job of the Vice President. The Vice President of Nigeria really should be the Minister of the Economy.
Right.
You know, the Vice President of Nigeria, I know previous times like Osinbajo was the one that was chairing the economy team.
I think the Vice President.
So the Vice President, together with the CBN Governor, the Minister of Finance, the Auditor General, so on and so forth, should be able to be doing, like you said, a quarterly town hall meeting with the media, where they're bringing out what we have just discussed, you know, the issues, the figures, and then people can ask them questions, and they should be honest about it. Look, we didn't perform here. We are not performing well here. We're performing well here, but we feel the need to be transparent to the people. And based on that, companies can hear that and make decisions.
Right.
That, look, it looks like government is saying they're underperforming here, so there may be a tweak in the budget. There may be a tweak in the implementation. They might pull some things back and replace them. There might be supplementary budgeting going further down. But when you simply do, press releases or press statements, and there's no chance for interaction, you know, with the citizens and the media get involved, unfortunately, you and I, we see in other countries where the prime ministers and the presidents interact directly with the media on a weekly basis. They go to the media house within the presidential palaces, and they talk to them, and they get asked difficult questions, and they are transparent to the people. I don't see any reason why, unless someone has something to hide, that you cannot go and report back to the people that voted you into office. And I think it's not good for business people either, because everybody is now walking around in darkness, not quite sure what anything means and how to apply to your businesses, except you are politically connected, which should not be the way you grow your economy.
Okay, a very tricky one. Before we allow you go, how much of damage is budget padding causing to our economy?
Again, I will use the example of my time in office. I was in Morocco when I got a call that I should come to the National Assembly to defend the budget. I never wrote. So a budget was prepared for my federation. I didn't write the budget. Somebody wrote the budget within the ministry at that time, because I then asked the question, where did it come from? Oh, this budget we have been using since. It's the same templates now. We just put 10% every year. So that tells you that the seriousness with which this budget is taken, that all of us are talking about now, you don't even know whether some people just looked and used the template, and nobody actually went and did a check on the prices. And as a citizen, it's very important for me to say this, very, very important, so that political leaders don't make the mistake of thinking just because something was brought to them, it was done properly. So how do you then know if it's padded when you do not even know the basis for the line items? How would you know? So before you can even accuse people of padding, you first have to ask, which retreat did you organize to discuss the budget of your department? Where did you sit and meet to decide? Where did you get the figures you used to? Nobody's doing it. Again, that takes me back to what I said about setting up an independent economic team, a presidential team that is completely apolitical, whose job it is to do this on a regular basis. That will force a lot of these agencies of government and ministries every year to sit up and get the right. You might discover at the end of the day, the true budget is about half of what we are talking about.
Okay. Now, such an eye-opener this discussion has been today. Thank you so much, Judge Ashiri, for finding time to be here on the program today.
Thank you.
All right, that's the much we'll take on this side of the table. Today, we'll take a quick break. When we return, Adebimpe and Joy will take you through their Lagos conversation.
The views expressed on this program do not represent that of the producer, management of Lagos Television, or the Lagos State Government. They remain the perspectives of those expressing them. Thank you for staying with Lagos Television.